Mieti, and I am the swissnex Boston's Art Programming Associate here in our consulate in Boston. And on this event moderating with me will be Julia Bonten from SciArt Initiative and Laura Stalder from swissnex in New York. Before I will dig in deeper the subjects, I will quickly introduce swissnex to our people here. swissnex Boston is the Swiss Science and Technology Consulate. We focus on creating networks between Switzerland and the East Coast of the United States as part of a worldwide network. And we create those networks in the areas of research, education, innovation, and the arts. So specifically, the arts programming supports artists. We support designers, cultural institutions, and art schools in expanding their reach here in North America. We also help them find the right partners and platforms to show their works and show their talent. So now it is my special pleasure to very shortly introduce you the 4 fantastic speakers we will have on our panel today. Our first speaker will be Professor Dr. Claudio Tessone. He is the academic director and chairman at the UZH Blockchain Center in Zurich. Secondly, Sarah Meyohes. She is a French-American artist who centers her practice within emerging technologies. And then third and fourth speakers will be Carmen and Doma from the artist duo Mediengruppe Bitnik, who are contemporary artists working on and with the internet. So now I'm giving the word to Julia, who will introduce you into SciArt Initiative and also to Leonardo. Take it away.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Laura. My name is Julia Bonten, and I'm the director of SciArt Initiative. It's our pleasure to collaborate with swissnex Boston on these laser events. To tell you a little bit about SciArt, in case you're new to us, we are a United States-based 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to bridging the gulf between the arts and sciences through a variety of monthly and annual programs, laser of which is one of them. And to tell you a little bit more about Laser Boston is, again, it's co-organized by these 2 organizations here. And it's actually a program of the larger nonprofit, Leonardo, the International Society for the Arts, Sciences, and Technology. Our Laser Boston meets roughly 4 times per year, but you can actually find lasers all over the world, and many of them are digital now. So if you're curious about that, you can find more about that online. And without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce you to Claudio Tessone, our first speaker of the day. Claudio Tessone is the chairman of the UZH Blockchain Center and professor for network science at the University of Zurich. His main interest lies in the study of complex socioeconomic and socio-technical systems from an interdisciplinary perspective. Specifically, he aims to unveil links between microscopic agent behavior, the rules agents follow, and the emergent global of these systems. Blockchain-based systems, cryptocurrencies, and other digital tokens are pillars of his current activities. This includes cryptoeconomics, big data blockchain analytics and forensics, and the analysis of economic incentives, which are fundamental to multiple blockchain platforms. He is also the director of the interdisciplinary UZH Summer School Deep Dive into Blockchain and co-directs the Certificate of Advanced Studies on Blockchain at the University of Zurich. Claudio, I will let you take it from here.
Thank you very much, Julia. Thank you very much to swissnex Boston for inviting me to this presentation. I have a difficult task now, that is try to introduce the concepts of blockchains and why they are such a fascinating subject of study in 12 minutes. So let me try to make my best try. As Julia was saying, I'm doing research in the border between analytics, data analytics, big scale data analytics, economics, and computer science. And blockchains, specifically those that are permissionless, like those that give rise to cryptocurrencies, are a very interesting subject of study because of the reasons I'm going to explain in a few seconds. So why were blockchains created? The reason is that with the backdrop of the crisis in 2008, 2009, there was a lot of backlash to the economic system as it was working, but also and mainly to the emergence of central actors in different facets of our economy. On the one hand, you have this ever-increasing power of centralized actors that are able to verify, to hold our data and verify, for example, that the transactions are taking place, like every time that we do electronic payments. And they have unmatched power inside of the systems. Okay, we have very few of these actors. But on the other side, there is another level of centralization, that is that of who has the right of create money. Okay, and then we have very few. We have banks and central banks that, in different ways, push monetary supply into our economies. And the basic idea was try to to democratize in a way, to decentralize these two aspects of the economy, to create a new economic system in which everybody could be able to participate of the process of money creation, and on the other hand, to allow for the centralized network of confirmation of these payments. But there was another aspect that was very central to this discourse, that was also anonymity. People wanted that the identities to remain unknown while using this system. And so the question is, how did these premises fare? In order to answer this question, let me briefly explain how a blockchain works. A blockchain is just in their more traditional setups, is just a sequence of all the transactions that have been ever recorded in the system. Because if you want this kind of decentralized payment network, the simplest approach that we can have in order to verify the correctness of the transactions is that everybody in the system has a copy of all the transactions that ever occurred. And this is what a blockchain is. Specifically, a block is a bundle of transactions that have been verified by someone. And the first question that arises here is, if we have this kind of system, why should someone start to verify these transactions? But if we think that also this public record contains all the transactions ever created, and in one example here at random, Fred sends to Bob one unit of the account, the question is, Fred should have received this one Bitcoin, for example, from someone else, and this from someone else, and from someone else. But if this is the complete set of transactions, when were the assets created? How? And the best thing about cryptocurrencies is that the answer to these two questions, why verifying and what is the origin of the assets, is answered at the same decision in the design of the systems, which is adding a single transaction to each block. Remember, a block is a set of verified transactions by someone. And because as a price, as a reward for verifying all these transactions, this block creator will be allowed to issue a transaction to himself, herself, and in this way, this transaction would not have a sender, but would only have him as a recipient. And therefore, we will be creating money in this way. So verifying allows you to receive the reward for creation, for keeping the system consistent. And then there are some aspects on how these blockchains work. On the one hand is that you have this information, the sequence of blocks is replicated everywhere in the network. Okay, so here in the right, what you see is a very simple representation of a node, and this overlay, this blue rhombus on top, means that the last block that is known to this node is a blue rhombus. Okay, so this is a very simple schematic representation of a blockchain. A blockchain is a sequence of blocks. The original block is this circle, there are some others that follow that contains more and more transactions that are sequentially added until the last one is this blue rhombus. And consensus is fundamental for these systems to work. So if we think that this is the network of computers that are connected to, let's say, the Bitcoin or the Ethereum system, in this representation, what we have is that all the network nodes have the same local copy of the blockchain because all of them know the same sequence of blocks until the blue rhombus. And this is exactly a situation in which we would like to be. Why? Because in this way, we know that all the transactions are known to everybody that is connected to the system. So in a way, everybody trusts all the set of transactions. And this is why keeping this kind of configuration is optimal for the system. This is not an optimal situation because here you have that different nodes have different histories of the blockchains. And what happens here is that a fork has occurred. The system has ways of amending this kind of natural force that exists. But remember, what you want is that everybody, every node in the network has the same local copy of the blockchain. So the question that we have with this kind of system is whether this really represents a decentralized economy. When you look into the data, and this is the kind of research that we are performing with my group, what you see on the one hand, as you perhaps may have heard, is that there is a lot of power concentration in terms of who is able to create these new blocks. Okay, this is one kind of concentration that emerges naturally in these systems, and which means that fewer and fewer actors are able to include information inside of the blockchain, and therefore the decentralized nature of the verification process is certainly at risk. On the other side, what you also observe is that actually the amount of miners, and miners means the people that is being rewarded for the process of creating new money, is always shrinking. This number is constantly, and in all systems, always reducing in size. So this dream of having a decentralized system where everybody is able to create also money is also not there. Another aspect of this is also that there is an increase in concentration of wealth in the system because you have more and more people trying to buy into the systems and receiving less as always smaller parts of the total supply that these systems contain. What is very interesting as well is that when you start to analyze the data, exchanges are actually outside of the systems. Exchanges only do not record all the information inside of the blockchains. However, as part of our analysis, we see that the way in which all these individuals, all the users of this system exchange value through transactions in the blockchain is a very good predictor for price movements. What is interesting is that over time, new and new assets were created on top of these systems. And for example, you may have heard that tokens it's possible to create tokens as well on top of these systems that are not the natural cryptocurrency, but other units of value. And what we see is that the economic processes that lead to concentration of wealth or of centralization of power inside of the systems are even more accelerated in these tokens. Okay. And what we also see is that actually the consensus can fail and be, what is worse, can be exploited in a way by specific actors. Okay. The final thing, and I only show this because it is a very nice plot, is that with respect to anonymity, these systems show that actually because of the patterns of usage of the different users, they disclose a lot of information constantly about their identity. And having proper representations of these users is a possibility thanks to a family of heuristics, but mainly to the statistical regularities that the large amount of users just produce because of the way in which they use the systems. And there are a lot of problems and reasons on why this is happening, and specifically the incentives, that is a central part of our research, is a fundamental part of it. The last thing that I want to say is that actually existing blockchain-based systems are not the panacea. Actually, they failed at the way of delivering the promises that they were, the narratives that they were creating. But at least they represent a very interesting opportunity for us to learn. Blockchains, being these ledgers, save a lot of information about economic processes and at the end of the day of parts of our society. And we all know that economy and society are complex systems, and they cannot be controlled in a very simple and rigid way like the rules that have been applied to the first generations of blockchain-based systems. And what I am really waiting for, and this is what our research leads to, is trying to have an adaptive design to blockchain-based systems, guided basically by interdisciplinary understanding that are fundamental in order to release the potential of this technology. Okay, and what I was saying is just the beginning. Okay, this is a final plot that I have that is a very comprehensive taxonomy of all the traits that blockchain technologies have. And what I was talking about in these very few minutes is only this part. So there is a lot of potential to unveil several things related to blockchain-based systems. I will be more than happy to discuss this with you. Thank you very much.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Claudio. And we have a question for you right here. The question is coming from Ben Bogart, and they are asking Claudio, does Tezos resolve any of these issues with older blockchains?
Yes, partially yes. Partially yes. Tezos, what I was explaining more in detail were blockchain-based systems that use proof of work. Tezos uses an alternative consensus mechanism that is proof of stake, that in principle at least leads to not so much energy waste in the process of creation of the assets. However, Tezos addresses some of these aspects. I like very much the generation of Tezos, Cardano, IOTA, and so on, because they solve some of the issues, but not all. And specifically, one of the things that I am not particularly, that the thing that could be solved, and Tezos has a very interesting adaptive system with respect to this in terms of governance, is that a large fraction of the tokens are still controlled by a few actors as well. Specifically, the platform creators are a very powerful player inside of these systems. And I think that the third generation of cryptocurrencies or blockchain-based systems, I would like to see it in a little bit of more of an egalitarian system. Okay, Heather, please go ahead, Laura.
Okay, so we will just have one question here, and all the other questions we will answer at the end and our question and answers in the session. That will be a half an hour. So for now, one more question. Can you comment on cryptos such as Orchid?
I can comment later, but I can answer the last question now if you do not mind. Such that I can provide a better question answer to Heather.
No worries. So let's just move on then. Laura, please introduce our second speaker.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Claudio. Our next speaker is Sarah Meyohes. So it's my pleasure to introduce you to her. She's a French-American artist. She centers her practice within emerging technologies, working in media from cryptocurrency to augmented reality. She enlists the natural world as references, network as medium, and the specular as a mode of contemplation. By merging traditional mythologies and cliched objects of beauty with contemporary digital mediums, Sarah enacts a visual language for the systems, algorithm, and technologies that influence our daily lives. She exhibits her work internationally with solo exhibitions in New York City at Red Bull Art Center and 303 Gallery. Her work has traveled the institutions, including the Barbican in London, the Jameel Art Centers in Dubai, the Ming Contemporary Art Museum in Shanghai, and the New Museum here in New York. She's been featured in the New York Times, Time Magazine, Wired, Vice, Outforum, and The Atlantic. And her film Cloud of Petals has been screened at various film festivals, including the Minneapolis Simple International Film Festival, Slamdance, and the Locarno Film Festival in Switzerland. Sarah holds a Bachelor of Science in Finance from Wharton School and a Bachelor of Arts in International Relations from the University of Pennsylvania. And in 2015, she received an MFA from Yale University. Sarah, the floor is yours. Thank you for being with us today. And just a side note for the public that you can always submit questions as she goes in the Q&A box. Thank you.
Hello, hello everybody. So I'm going to share my screen. Let's see. That should be working. So I'm going to tell you a story, essentially, about an art piece that I made a long time ago now. I was still in grad school, and I created a cryptocurrency in 2014, and I called it Bitcoin, and I launched it in February 2015. And these dates are important because, you know, Ethereum launched 5 months later in July 2015. So this is really crypto antiquity, and NFTs, you know, just didn't even exist. And I am not the most advanced technologist. So I did this. So, and often when I use technology, it's part of a narrative. And so anyways, I'll keep going. So I designed Bitcoin as a cryptocurrency backed by my photography at a fixed exchange rate of 1 Bitcoin to 25 square inches of photographic prints. So as my work changes in value over time, so should the relative value of Bitcoin. And the release of 200 Bitcoins was matched with the placement of a corresponding set of prints as per the exchange rate in a safety deposit box at a bank. And so a Bitcoin holder can trade or convert their coins into any of my prints. And to put it in more financial terms, this is essentially creating an asset-backed security collateralized by my current and future artistic output. And so why would I do this? Because this was really a conceptual artwork in line with, you know, relational aesthetics, which was something I was interested at the time, turning the artist into a currency. And that it also happens to be one of the first examples of tokenizing art on the blockchain, I think just goes to show that generally artists can point towards the future, right? And that's the beauty of, you know, artistic experimentation. But at the time, just to give you my rationale, I was just entering the art market, and the truth is that it's incredibly financialized. And what I was seeing is that cultural value and monetary value are in a tight feedback loop for, you know, ever. Gold is a primary example of that, and that how something is exchanged affects how value, you know, is determined. And this is not the rationale behind doing something like this and doing some of the other projects that had to do with financial manipulation later on is essentially taking the logic of a system to the extreme. And that's a way of making it visible. You know, capitalism and money are like these great abstractions that have very real effects. Blockchain too. And so I'm basically pushing something to the extreme, inserting myself into a system, and then, you know, making it more visible. So I did this at the time. I only sold 200 coins, but the idea just like circulated. It was, you know, I was unknown at the time, but suddenly, so I'll go through the slides. I gave people certificates. Nobody at the time wanted to download a client that I had, you know, developed with a developer. So I had these physical certificates, which is quite quaint, of the public key with the private key on the back. This was the Bitcoin wallet. This was the print that went into the bank. This was the first photograph that backed it. And it was the beginning of a series called Speculations. And arguably, speculations have now been the greatest use case of Bitcoin. And we'll get back to speculation, but I made these with two-way mirrors. And that is, my body. And in a sense, I'm, creating space metaphorically. There was a mine that was mining, and this was the photograph backing it. And the interesting thing about photography is that, and this will dovetail, I do want to address this craze in NFT these days, is that photography for a long time has not been valued as richly as painting because it's endlessly reproducible. And so what the market has done is you are allowed to print a photograph and edition it, and then that makes it materially scarce, which goes against its nature essentially. And it's kind of like, how governments printing money, like rendering something more or less materially scarce. And that was how the market ascribed value to photography. But even so, photography has never reached the levels of financial accumulation that you see in paintings, right? In paintings, when you look at an $100 million painting, you're partly looking at an image and you're partly looking at the spectacle of like that much financial accumulation in such a small physical piece. And it's worth noting that the financialization of the art world was accompanied by the growth in the like logistics and storage, right? Because you both need that unique material for value to accumulate, but then you need to kind of abstract that away for exchange to happen. And so what NFTs now do, right, is that you are really just value now can accumulate in the token completely separately from what the image is. The image now is, the art is as dematerialized as possible. It's practically just an excuse for tokens to become this like speculative vehicle. And exchange has been so smooth that, it's like, it just makes sense in how it's designed now that it would be so speculative. So this is an image which I find quite humorous of CoinSpeaker. And at the time, my endorsement of Bitcoin was higher news than Larry Summers's endorsement of Bitcoin, which is quite hilarious. And so, yeah, so it's interesting because I created Bitcoin at the time to make a commentary on the art world. And since then, it's kind of become reality, right? Now, the truth is that these NFTs are very much like Bitcoin. The only difference is that they're supposedly unique, they're non-fungible, though when an artist mints an edition of 700 of the same image, that image gains currency. And it's also worth noting that the artists that have become most popular engage in what this practice they call everydays, posting every day, which is kind of like, I think that's like a totally ridiculous thing, but it does mean that that the work gains a type of currency, and so it's now kind of become reality, for better or for worse, and yeah, it's kind of amazing, and I would love questions because I like to, dialogue rather than lecturing is my MO. So yeah, that's it for now. I don't know if. Oh.
Thank you so much, Sarah.
Yeah.
Your wonderful presentation, very interesting. I'm very sure everyone agrees. So there is right now one question for you, and it is Bitcoin still making returns for you?
So yeah, this is a very funny question because the fact that it's backed by my photography means that there is essentially a built-in exchange rate in a sense, because I sell my photography for dollars in traditional galleries. And so in a sense, Bitcoin has increased in value. It's like doubled, right, in the last sort of few years. And at the time it was like somewhat inflated given that you could, buy a small piece. Anyways, so it has increased, but I haven't released new ones. And I am like totally on edge about whether I should or not. I'm like totally on edge about whether I should kind of mint some as NFTs or if that's kind of just cashing in, or I have some other ideas about playing with like the medium of NFTs and the way, you know, these auctions are these, you know, like performative moments where people are just, you know, bidding each other, you know, bidding up the price. You know, Beeple is like the Donald Trump of the art world. You know, he's just like came in, broke all the systems, like he's like watching Fox News and CNN, and it's like regurgitating our media landscape back to us. And the buyers of that Beeple like were his previous buyers. And so there's a complete price manipulation in that as well. So I'm like very hesitant about getting back into the fray of it.
Okay, I hope we will get back to that in the question and answer at the end. For now, I'm asking Laura to please introduce our third and fourth speaker for their presentation.
Absolutely, it is my pleasure. So our third and fourth speaker together are Carmen Weisskopf and Doma Smoljo, who founded Mediengruppe Bitnik. Carmen and Doma are contemporary artists working on and with the internet. Their practice expands from the digital to physical spaces, often intentionally applying loss of control to challenge established structures and mechanisms. In the past, they've been known to subvert surveillance cameras, bug an opera house to broadcast its performances outside, and physically glitch a building. In 2014, they sent a bot called Random Darknet Shopper on a 3-month shopping spree in the darknet, where it randomly bought items like keys, cigarettes, trainers, and ecstasy, and had them sent directly to the gallery space. Carmen's and Doma's works formulate fundamental questions concerning contemporary issues and are shown internationally. Carmen and Doma, the floor is yours. Oh, your mic is not working, or is it only on my side?
Yeah. Hi again. Can you hear us now? I suppose yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Hey.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for having us. It's a great pleasure to be here. We'd like to talk to you about two of our works which kind of involve crypto and blockchain. I think our interest in crypto and blockchain began with a work that Laura already mentioned very briefly called Random Darknet Shopper. This was a work we did within an exhibition after a longer research into darknets and internet subcultures. This again stemmed from an interest in kind of anonymizing networks after the Snowden revelations in 2013. We spent about, I mean, for us, the Snowden revelations kind of felt like we were losing our digital Heimat, our internet to mass surveillance practices. And so we spent a lot of time kind of using artistic practices to look into how people were using darknet structures, subcultures, collaborative practices to kind of find a different way of being within digital systems. And we ended up curating a whole show called From Memes to Onionland, an exploration at Kunsthalle St. Gallen in Switzerland, together with Giovanni Carmine, the curator there, and next to 12 other works by different artists, you know, which talked about different issues like identity, anonymity, trust. We also realized a work called Random Darknet Shopper.
So basically, I think we were kind of like interested in this kind of like shopping structures on the deep webs. And the main question was basically, how do you trust each other if you don't know to whom you're speaking, because like on the deep webs, you don't know where the server is hosted. You don't know who the seller is. You don't know how these things work really, or where stuff is located. So how do you make kind of like, how do you enable trust within like encrypted systems? So for that reason, we basically brought up this bot. I wrote a small piece of software which would autonomously like log in to the deep webs once in a week, and the bot owns Bitcoins. So it had like a budget of $100 each week to spend. So it would log into the deep webs, log into one of the big, at that time, always the biggest kind of like darknet store, and scrape the whole website, look for every item, parse out items which are more expensive than the $100, and then randomly buy an item from the shop. And it would also write an email to the kind of like an internal PGP encrypted mail to the seller, asking them to ship them directly to the gallery space. So basically it was, you know, you have like this lake of darkness, and from time to time, like an item would pop up and being sent like to the exhibition space. So what you see here in the image is, on the right is the random darknet chopper, the bot. It's just like a computer which owns Bitcoins, has Bitcoins, and executes itself once a week.
Yeah. And to the left, you see the vitrines waiting for the items to arrive. So this was a 3-month exhibition, and this meant we had 12 weeks, 12 items that would be shipped to the exhibition space. And the items would just arrive. They would be unpacked and placed into the vitrines. And this meant that we, over the course of the exhibition, received a kind of maybe a landscape of items from the darknets. The first items you just saw were Fire Brigade master key set, cigarettes, a fake handbag.
For $100.
Yeah, at the time, just a quick comment on the Bitcoin price. At the time, Bitcoin was priced at around $230. I mean, it fluctuated a bit. So this work happened in the autumn of 2014 until January 2015. This was a stolen credit card.
Information which we never tried out, so we don't know if it worked or not.
Yeah, and then in week 6, it bought 10 yellow ecstasy pills from Germany, which were promptly shipped across the border into Switzerland, and which we exhibited like all other items. And this caused the work to be very widely received in newspapers covering everything from technology, but also, you know, The Guardian writing about this autonomous bot. And this was kind of the topic that was raised with this, you know, this question of responsibility of a bot, which, you know, buys illicit goods, and you don't really know what to do about it within the legal system.
Yeah, like who's responsible at that moment? Is it, can the software be an entity by itself? Is it the programmer? What if the program is open source? How do we deal like in future with all these algorithms going maybe crazy and breaking the law? So random darknet chopper was kind of like used to basically trigger that discussion. So it bought those kind of like ecstasy pills, and kind of like the media jumped onto the performance. It bought Nike. The next week it bought Nike Air GZ2 from China. And for $100, like most probably also fake, they look really real, kind of like when you feel them. A week later, it bought a cap, a spy cam, some postal services, Sprite's dash can, diesel jeans. And a
passport scan,
kind of like a very low res JPEG file, which you can use basically to claim identity online. So many of the kind of like online services nowadays are asking for verification or proof of identity. So this stuff is just like floating around.
Yeah, this another image from the exhibition towards the end of the 12 weeks. So over this performance time, we kind of had a very wide variety of items arrive from the darknets, paid for by Bitcoins. And the day after we dismantled, took apart the exhibition, the Swiss police came in to seize the work and arrest the robots. This for us in a first moment was very confusing because at that point we weren't expecting this to still happen. And we were quite worried about quite a few of the items the bots had bought. It turned out that the public prosecutor was especially interested in the ecstasy, the drugs, and yeah, we were then summoned for questioning. Can you do the next? Oh, another one. And people on the internet make jokes about this performance art robot getting arrested in 2015. And we tried to talk to the public prosecutor about the value of artistic practices in kind of as a thinking space, also about what's happening within a society with technologies, and that we felt that we were raising questions that were really important, and that these needed to sometimes, you know, kind of push the law a bit. And in the end, the work was released back to us after about 3 months, and we were not prosecuted for having bought drugs. Our robot was not prosecuted for having bought drugs.
Like in Swiss law, there is something like freedom of art, and the prosecutor said like that he kind of like trusts us, that we didn't want to kind of like sell the art, that it was kind of like that it falls like within the thing, but as a state that they needed to act properly and that they couldn't give us back the drugs we asked for because we said it's art and we wanted our art piece back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. This was kind of our starting point, maybe into this blockchain crypto world, and it stayed with us over the years. And just quickly, a very quick look into a second work we've done. This was a cooperation or a collaboration with Omsk Social Club here in Berlin, where we're based around crypto mining. And we used, basically the idea was to use the browser mining functionalities of Monero to power and execute crypto raves. So in this collaboration, we programmed a website where you were invited to mine a ticket to participate in a crypto rave.
So basically you would donate your CPU of your computer to be able to participate in a rave, like kind of like a real IRL rave.
And only if you did this, you were allowed to see where the rave would happen. And you also, you did not only unlock your entry pass, you also received a new identity for your participation in this crypto rave. So the crypto rave itself was also a LARP, a live action role play, where we randomly gave out roles that were all connected with the crypto space. And the idea was to kind of create a night of thinking about the future of blockchains and crypto, and kind of let people do this by performing or being someone else, or, you know, enacting a, I don't know, a crypto whale, you know, or a
Satoshi, who invented
NFT collector,
invented
or
Bitcoin at the time, or invented
exactly.
Bitcoin, but is anonymous. So not only kind of like that you would get the ticket or an entity, also like the location was secret. So you would unlock the location after a while and then be able to come to the party. So we had like 400 written identities for this thing. So we could host around 400 people. The entry was free afterwards.
Yes.
And it could generate the QR code for you for the entrance. And here some images of those LARPs. So DJ who plays, Amnesia Scanner,
yeah,
raving attendants with it.
Yeah, we managed to organize 5 crypto raves in different cities in Europe, from Athens to Barcelona to Berlin, Basel, before the lockdown. And yeah.
At the moment, we are waiting for better times.
So yeah.
Yeah.
So thank you very much.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Carmen and Doma, for your presentation. Very, very interesting insights. Must have been very fun to working on those projects too.
Yeah.
So the first question I do have for you is, are there any conversations with the justice system?
After the random darknet chopper? Yes, we were summoned by the public prosecutor and had about probably an hour's worth of conversation with him about freedom of art and autonomous devices and robots, and how they should be treated within the law. We took our lawyer. With this work, we already had spoken to a lawyer beforehand. We knew that we were kind of entering legally muddy waters, and it was actually a really nice conversation. We had prepared, of course, an art history worth of people who had also worked with illicit items and kind of, you know, tried to make a case. Our aim was actually to be handed back the drugs. That didn't work, but at least we got back the rest of the work.
Yeah, I think like our strategy was basically to avoid go to court.
Yeah.
But our lawyer, he was kind of like, no, let's take it to court, because, you know, it's kind of like, it's the place where you can negotiate those things, and they're written into law. And yeah, but kind of like we try to avoid that, and we're kind of like happy that the public prosecutor also kind of like understood that they were part of the performative work also, kind of like at that moment. And he took that really serious, and he said like that he strongly believes that, like, you know, it kind of like raises fundamental questions within his field. So he's very interested in those topics, and kind of like acknowledged the value of the piece somehow, and kind of like let us go also.
Interesting. Seems like you really opened Pandora's box there. So now please, Claudio and Sarah, turn on your cameras, join us here on stage, virtual stage, and then we will start our open Q&A session.
Open my camera. I cannot open my video, sorry.
No worries.
No, that's fine. What I'm saying is I am unable because I was disabled from doing so. If you can reopen it, I will do it immediately.
Oh, that's weird.
Yeah, there it is.
Perfect. Thank you. So I have my wonderful helpers and fairies in the background who will sort out all of your questions, and I will just be shooting them to you. And let's hope for vivid conversations and interesting questions. So I am jumping in and I am asking for Sarah. The question is, what's your view of the future of NFT? I saw you answer that in a question box, but I still ask you to jump into that question right now.
Yeah. Well, first thing, we are in like maximum hype. You know, there's going to be a crash. Part of it is because Bitcoin and Ethereum have had such an increase in their price that has second order effects where anything associated with it also kind of becomes more expensive. So it's going to crash, but that doesn't mean that NFTs are going to go away. They're going to stay, in my opinion. I do think that, I have some predictions. I hope that things can be like, that there won't be one company like a Facebook, that becomes a dominant platform where all transactions happen. I do think that there can be kind of niches, and that's the hope for like Web 3.0. And I do think that NFTs like can work with that. I think it's very exciting, to be honest. Right now, it's just for like digital pictures and videos, but it's going to extend to text, to music, and it's going to allow like a tighter feedback loop between creators and consumers. Right now, there's no good way to consume these things. Like the fact that this has been like almost like a financial innovation, in my view, means that all of the platforms are just focused on trading and buying and selling. But eventually there's going to be, fun ways that people will just scrape, the Ethereum blockchain for all of the NFTs and create like a searchable web of things over time. You could go from collection to collection, like things will emerge that I think will be more geared towards consumption and towards like crypto kind of users. Right now, the audience is very much crypto people. And I do hope that it can expand.
I am wondering, how are your thoughts on the alignment of the actual analog art market and the NFT art market?
Alignment.
Or like major like differences, like where do they meet, or where do they essentially drift?
Yeah. So, Christie's did a Beeple sale. Christie's was like the marketing machine here. Like it was kind of putting the two worlds together and creating a lot of buzz. There's disalignment in the fact that these are completely different audiences. The people buying traditional art and the people buying NFTs are completely different. Is that going to change? Are they going to get closer together? Like maybe. Definitely the traditional art market is going to cater to these consumers because they are spending meaningful amounts of money. And the art world generally has had, even just in the last year, they've had to kind of move more online. So I think they're going to get closer. Right now, they're worlds apart, but I do think that they will get closer.
Okay, thank you. So the next question is for Claudio. And the question is, do you think we will see any CBDC in the near future?
Mm-hmm. So certainly, most likely the Chinese will take over the space very soon. They're very good at implementing at a very fast pace this kind of innovation. So here in Switzerland, the SNB has been thinking of pilots and actually implementations of a CBDC, and is one of the more advanced countries also as well in this regard. It is just a natural evolution. I think that if there is something that cryptocurrencies proved, is that people really want means of payments, but actually that there are smarter means of payments. I think that what Sarah and also Carmen and Doma were explaining before as well point out into that direction. I think that you can do many more things with these means of payments that credit cards are just pale in comparison.
Right, thank you. Now, the next question is for Carmen and Doma. And the question is, for the Bitcoin Rave, how many people came and how did you circulate or promote the event? Any anonymous networks?
Yeah, I mean, like it was an online event, so it's just like started to share the links around those things. Started to kind of like, we just show up with this website and hope that the website is kind of like nicely designed enough, it would make its own rounds within the scenes. And normally kind of like the cities would pick that up. You know, if we did one in Berlin, we would be kind of like not sold out, but like we would get like 200 people or 400 people. And we also collaborated with other institutions, which kind of like started to make buzz about the thing. And then we hoped kind of like for response. Of the...
Yeah, and the events were site specific to each city. So they were, I mean, they were a mixture of commissions by institutions based in that city.
But then working with local producers also.
Exactly.
Because I mean, like for us, it's hard from Berlin to organize anything in Athens. You know, kind of like working there with the key players of the rave scenes also.
Exactly. And in terms of participation, it was, I'd say, between about 100 and maybe 20 to 400 people. This also depended on the venue we had in each city. Usually there would also be like art inserts, which now we didn't talk about, where we invited artists to kind of site specifically also react to the local crypto scene. And I think for us, it was also maybe the idea also was to maybe do something a bit more than exactly what has happened now with these NFTs, that where we kind of see only very limited things that you can do with the blockchain and crypto space is actually happening within the art world. And I think that was kind of our idea. I mean, for many people, this website, Mining Monero, for the ticket was the first time they ever got in contact with mining. You know, we would get emails by people going like, oh, I pressed mine and then my fan went off. And, you know, is my computer broken now? And that was kind of what we wanted, to get people to actually, you know, experience this space. And but, you know, because we believe that art can do that. It can kind of involve you in a different way.
I also have like a question, if I can, maybe we can do it later, but Claudio, regarding those NFTs, maybe I'm just like interested in your opinion, like also more like from a technical understanding what it is. Like when you look into the contracts, which are like within those NFTs, what you see is just like that you're buying a text file, giving you a link to a file which is hosted on a peer-to-peer file system somehow. But it's kind of like you don't own the file, because that's kind of like the original JPEG or something that can disappear also, because it's just like an HTTP link.
Sure, and so, that can be duplicated or replicated as much as people want. So the only thing is that you can claim that you have some usage rights or whatever, reproduction rights and so on, but not other than that. I also wanted to say something. It's fascinating. I really like, sorry for, but I also wanted to tell you and also Sarah that I am really fascinated by the things that you people from art are doing with blockchain-based systems. Perhaps I knew other people like Matthias Tarsiewicz in Austria, Rosan Polat here in Zurich, that have been doing fascinating things as well. I remember one thing which similar to one of your concepts, that was mining hardware that would only start to mine when people would be approaching and looking at the thing, just producing money exactly the same way. It's a very good metaphor. I like it very much. That's right.
Beautiful. So the next question that I'm having here is for Sarah again. And the question is, will NFT really change the art infrastructure if we have the powerful players like Christy investing into NFT infrastructures?
I mean, yeah, kind of like the question before. Christie's is good marketing, and they're just trying to get into the business. I think Christie's is somewhat irrelevant to whether NFTs, take off or not. They're just trying to get a slice for themselves. I do think that it will have some changes, mostly in digital artists. It's not that their work didn't have value before. It's that their work now can become a tool for speculation, just like 20th century modern art paintings can be a tool for speculation. That's the difference. It's a financial innovation. And in a sense, it will draw a lot more attention. More people might make more digital artworks now because they hope, that they can be remunerated for it. So I do think, I do think it's positive. Yeah.
So the next question is for everyone. How are you feeling about resource use in crypto change using POW? What is a reasonable carbon footprint for art?
Yeah. Okay. I'll jump in. So first of all, there's been like a lot of talk that Ethereum, which is what most NFTs are on, will change from proof of work to proof of stake, which has like big implications for for the carbon footprint. Maybe Claudio can speak to this more. I am like not sure how far away this is, when this is going to happen. They've been talking about it for a while. It's unclear. So that's one thing. I've thought about this for a while. I have not released any NFTs, partly for my own kind of guilt of like, do I want to use this much carbon to put up an image? So I haven't stepped into it yet. But I don't think that we should like stop the development of this because we don't have like the most efficient system yet. And we do have so much work on like creating, on renewable energy anyways, to do like, this is like such a tiny sliver. It almost feels, and so many other things have carbon footprints that we just can't measure as well. So it does feel like a little bit of like self-flagellation to be like, no, like we're going to stop this. No, it's going to happen. People are going to do it. We just need to learn how to do it in a better way, and also have a lot more renewable energy available. So that's kind of my hot take.
I can continue if you don't mind, Carmen and Doma.
Sure.
So I had to go too fast, but remember that I said something in my presentation. You have this whole list of transactions that ever occurred, and then you are rewarding people for doing the job of verifying the transactions, okay? Remember, and the reward is being able to add a new transaction in which they are given some amount of Ether. We are talking about Ethereum here. And this is proof of work. There is something that is usually never discussed, and it is very important to bring it into this answer now. The amount that should be the reward for that task has nothing to do with the technology. It's a completely arbitrary decision by the creators of the system. And the point is that all creators, Ethereum creators, Bitcoin creators, and everybody that followed those paths thought that scarcity is fundamental, and actually the limitedness on the total amount of tokens is fundamental for incentivizing people to participate. And at the end of the day, this creates a kind of dystopian environment in which the best thing that you can do with these assets is speculate. And this was mentioned all the time also by Carmen, Sarah, and so on. So, and this is fundamental. There is nothing in the technology that says the amount of these assets should be finite. Our economies do not have finite number of our units of account. And what this creates is, we are talking about carbon footprints. because everybody has the incentive to mine as much as possible, to mine fast, because in 10 years from now, the reward will be lower, there will be no reward, and so on. And this is a completely arbitrary decision. I think that the only way, I like very much NFTs and so on. I think that they can democratize eventually, but these kind of markets. But in order to democratize the markets, we need to create a decentralized economy, one that does not have the levels of concentration that these economies have. And there is a very simple way. I mean, if all of us sit together and look into the Bitcoin code or the Ethereum code, source code, we will find that we only need to change 10 or 20 lines of code in order to completely alter the rate of supply. But nobody does it. And if they want to preserve the status quo, it's exactly because it is a very speculative asset. And this is where the intentions of the creators and how eventually the system develops has a completely non-trivial interplay that is, to me, fascinating from the research point.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm like, for us, like most of the answers have been like covered like in the two things. That one feeling for us is also that we kind of like, we are really looking forward if like Ethereum, for example, makes that change to proof of stake, trying to kind of like implement that system rather faster than kind of like wait longer. And yeah, I mean, like for us, kind of like with the carbon footprint, it's also kind of, you know, if you try to sum up like how many flights it needs to take to sell a piece, you know, the artwork by itself, it's not kind of like carbon neutral at all. You know, it's kind of like it uses so much energy and time, and pieces, artworks travel from art fair to art fair. People go to that city. It's also kind of like, it also produces a lot of kind of like, yeah.
Thank you. So the next question will be also for everyone again. Have any of you explored the concept of smart contracts and the transaction of consuming or viewing art, or in other words, not for purchasing the art, but for acknowledging that a viewer was there, much as people post on Instagram their witnessing of a show?
I think that it is more for you people, because I could think of how to implement it, but you will have a practical use of it.
I'm not sure I totally understand the question about using smart contracts to track experience of the artwork. Is that the question?
Yes, to track or track transactions of consummation of the art rather than for buying the art, as I understand the question.
You know, that just makes me think of like a like, you know, when you like a picture, that's an acknowledgement that you looked at it, that you had presence with it. It's not as strong of a claim on an image as ownership, which is, you know, we live in capitalism. Ownership is part of our identity formation, I would say. So, but yeah, I haven't thought of smart contracts to acknowledge viewership, but maybe, who knows?
I mean, like one interesting artist, which is kind of like working within the field of smart contracts, is Jonas Lund, who gave out the Jonas Lund token. And basically, if you participate like within the Jonas Lund token, you hold shares of his artistic practice, basically. So he asks the people owning kind of like this token to participate in decision-making about his artistic life and about his future, if he should do a show or not, and which kind of like path he should take. So you become like, through those smart contracts, you become part of this kind of like artist's identity, which I kind of like really like as a, you know, kind of like a tokenized artist, which, you know, has a community around, which cares about like his well-being also.
Yeah, and I mean, for the crypto race, we read and wrote a lot around decentralized autonomous organizations, the DAOs, which kind of where the idea is to, you know, agree on central kind of contracts and then have these on the blockchain and just execute themselves. So I guess maybe the system is also not as evolved yet to maybe track, you know, just viewings of artworks. It's still, you know, the use of NFTs instead of, is a use where, you know, the art world usually hands out paper certificates. So it's kind of, you know, instead of that for the moment, and it's also limited to a certain type of art. I haven't heard of NFTs for conceptual work or for installation work, so it's kind of the purely digital reduced to...
Maybe it also became too expensive to store that kind of information on the chain, kind of like, this is why we're taking it out and, you know, trying to kind of like reconfigure stuff around it.
So now when we're not only talking about viewing art, but we're talking about producing arts, creating NFTs, selling them, for me, one of the like best and most sustainable aspects for selling NFTs for the artist's perspective of the artist is that most sites like Super Rare, Nifty Gateway, etc., they will reward the artist for eternity every time his art piece is being sold or bought, and they will have a certain percentage of their own artwork. So ownership has such a new meaning in this art world. So what are your thoughts on this principle when it comes to not only art but also to science, to publications and the other fields? And maybe this question is for everyone, but maybe especially for Claudio, since you're the scientist on this round.
Thank you very much. I think that in general, and I have to catch up again with the thing that was said in the previous answer as well, with respect to, for example, rewarding attention that a specific piece produces. And this can also be with respect to science as well. And I think that here there is a very interesting aspect that is reward. You see that what we always are talking about this, we are thinking of rewards only in terms of a monetary one. So it's just a payoff that you obtain in a single, if you allow me to say dimension, okay, which is money. Okay, this is what I am being paid for my work, what I am being rewarded because of my scientific creation. And I think that the attention and other social processes are in some contexts equally or important as well, not necessarily equally important, but have some degree of importance. And we are thinking always in terms of scarcity. In every one of our discussions, we are thinking of, this is the piece of art that I have bought, and this is the digital signature that I am buying it. And this is just a very simple reflection of our physical world. When we pay 1 Swiss franc in the bar to buy something, I am using a coin and I am receiving what is the rest of this economic exchange. And if you see, all the way in which we are thinking cryptocurrencies and digital assets as well still replicates that limitation of the physical world. But there is no reason for the digital assets to be scarce or to be conservative, that the exchange is conservative exactly in the same way as the physical counterparts, okay? And what I am talking here is that I think that these new platforms will create completely new ways of rewarding people that is not just the mere exchange of value as we are used to. And what I have to say is that all the incarnations, all the blockchains that we have been talking about still miss this. I think that this is a completely new dimension in which we will be able to implement things in the future in which we are not anymore limited to the mere exchange of value between parties. And I think that this also applies to science and art and any kind of human activity at the end. We have to stop thinking that there is only a single way of rewarding us. Okay, payoff, economic payoff is just one of the dimensions. We will find new and we will develop new.
Yeah, very good thought. Thank you for sharing. So I am going to hop onwards with the other questions now. For Doma and Carmen, were you surprised at some of the conversation that came up as a result of your work?
Depends on which conversations. I mean, if this refers to the legal conversations, probably, I'm assuming. We've done quite a few works that have produced quite a few papers within the field of law at universities, which is always very strange to us, because it's not the purpose of the work is not to kind of discuss topics within law, but we do see that when we as artists work with technology, we quickly reach the borders of what is discussed within society. And because these technologies are evolving so fast, it's very hard to keep up with the discussions, be they legal or be they, you know, within society. And this is something that interests us a lot, this question of, I think it's also something we see now with blockchain. You know, when you think back at the telephone that was invented before the radio, and in the beginning was actually used as a wired system to disseminate culture. So because you couldn't call anyone, so people installed telephones in their houses to remotely listen to the opera or remotely listen to a theatre performance, and there were orchestras playing for the telephone network. So it was essentially a radio that, you know, was just wired. And then the radio was invented, so the telephone became this person-to-person thing where you could privately talk to somebody. But this evolving of use of technology is something that's really interesting to us. And we do believe that it's hard to have these conversations because we don't naturally have one forum within society where we talk about, you know, how do we want to use this? People just go and do stuff. And that's kind of like why we also probably look for these conversations to happen, or are really happy when they do happen. And then sometimes, of course, within our field, we can often anticipate what we will be discussing or talking about. Outside our field, we're often we need to even find language to kind of understand what, you know, the issues are, because we're not lawyers and we don't know how that works.
And I mean, like, one of the strategies we kind of like apply to a lot of our projects is this kind of like loss of control, where you kind of like narrate the thing, you trigger something, you trigger a bot, you trigger a situation where you're not controlling it anymore. And, you know, kind of like the discussion also flows with like other players. And I mean, like, this is one thing we try and love to do. It's kind of like just like give a small impulse and then see how the system maybe reacts to it, and try to learn from it for other steps afterwards.
Right. So then the next question is more a practical question for Sarah, for all the future NFT artists out there. Is there any special courses that an artist can get online to become able to make NFTs? And what platform is the best for visual artists?
So there are a few. I think that if you just Google like how to make an NFT, there are definitely primers available. There are a few platforms that some of which you've probably heard of. There's Nifty Gateway, there's Super Rare, there's OpenSea, there's Foundation, and they kind of all have a little bit of a different vibe. You know, OpenSea is kind of like the eBay of NFTs, and Foundation is much more curated. And so Nifty Gateway is like kind of like where Grimes, you know, does a drop. So they just have a different vibe, and more will pop up, I'm sure. So just whatever you make, try to see, you know, look around. You know, have fun.
I mean, I know it is very hard at the moment to get into some of them. Well, obviously Nifty Gateway is like for already like very high and artists who are already known. And I know of my own experience from artists, friends of mine, it's hard to get into super rare. So
yeah, well, the easiest one is on OpenSea. You can create your own profile and put your things up. You know, but the question is like getting your stuff seen, right? You need to sort of build your own audience in a way, you know, that like instead of having thousands of people like Nifty Gateway gets thousands of people to bid on drops. But
they're
yeah,
also
OpenSea is
less than a second, so that makes the purchase very hard.
Yeah, but OpenSea is open, you know, you can list on OpenSea, anybody can, so.
Thank you. So, and then the next question is for Claudio, and this is the question that I initially asked in the Q&A in the beginning. So, and I'm going to ask it now again, can you comment on cryptos such as Orchid?
Well, if the question refers to Orchid as the VPN one, I think that there have been other, the one that serves a decentralized network of VPN service. I think that there have been other, let's say it's an idea that has been explored before, like for example with a Namecoin. In a way, it is a service that is offered and rewarded through the blockchain. I think that the main problem there is, like with all the blockchain-based systems, is gaining traction in terms of user adoption. Always, you always need a fully decentralized system. It's important. It's not nice to have. If you do not have a decentralized system with a lot of participants, the system is not as trustworthy. You have a lot of problems that because the system is not prepared to that. Okay, and the problem that I would also like to mention is that even when the system grows too much, the system stops behaving as it was designed. So there is a sweet point in which you have some sort of decentralization, some sort of distributedness, in which it works as advertised. Finding the right working condition is not always good because there are things that affect the way in which these systems work.
Right. So I think we have time for 3 more questions. There is a question from Amelia. She asks, Sarah, what kind of conceptual projects are you thinking of for your NFT work?
I'm still cooking up a project, and all I will say is that it will be called the non-existent token, and it'll be clever and funny. But I can't reveal anything more because it's not built, and like, you know, this is public, and you know, but yeah, I think I want to have a little bit of fun with this medium of these auctions and the speculation, and like make that very clear that that is what it is.
Okay, we're very much looking forward to it. In the loop. So one last question, and I would love everyone to answer this question individually. What are you most excited to work on as your next project, and why? Well, obviously you just said that, but maybe there's a project you can still share with us.
Yeah, I've been working on a few things. One is I've been writing a script to make a movie, and it's an adaptation of the myth of Medusa set in the contemporary perfume industry. And it has, yeah, so that's kind of the biggest project closest to my heart, nothing to do really with technology. And another project that kind of I had to put on pause because of COVID was an augmented reality project where there's a physical piano in the space, a grand piano, and then in HoloLens, there are digital birds and watercolor effects that land on the piano and trigger it to play, and it's generative music. There's spatialized sound, so where the birds travel, the sound also follows them. And it's been a total headache to make it. And then COVID meant that no one was going to be putting on a headset. And so I'm really looking forward to, you know, being able to put people in headsets again. Yeah. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah, we're also working on different stuff at the moment. We have some exhibitions coming up, which may or may not happen, but which we're still planning. But I think just because it's from today, what we're really excited about today is that we just received news that research project we applied for within the Swiss National Fund was granted today. And so we'll be working on the topic of what we call latent data, this question of data and its interpretation, and kind of the question of how data is not fact, you know, how data shifts depending on how you visualize it or how you talk about it or which data you choose. And we're really looking forward to working on that.
Interesting.
Well, I could say something related to research and say that we are creating a blockchain observatory, but I will not say that. I will try to say something related to that has as much as art as someone that comes from physical sciences can do. Okay, so what we are building is something that I am particularly fond of. We are creating this is a Raspberry Pi. Many of you may know them right there. We are creating a cluster of Raspberry Pis that has a screen on top of it. Okay, this is replaced by a screen. Okay, and we have a private network of blockchain consensus there. And what we want to do with this is basically create a very dynamic visualization of all the problems that the consensus has. So we are looking, for example, these kind of things that we were talking about, centralization, unmatched power by a single actor that creates all the blocks, rogue actors inside of the network, and so on, create a very dynamic look and just to explain people. And I think that how these systems work, which are the weaknesses and also the strengths. And I think that it would be more than happy to receive your feedback because it can be fun to work with.
Cool. Thank you so much. So we've come to the end of our laser talk this time. Thank you so much to our panelists, and thank you so much to our attendees. It was a great session. Each of your presentation was mind-blowing and super interesting. And also to our attendees, thank you so much for the many questions that you have posed. I really love that session a lot, and we'll see you in like 2 or 3 months for the next laser. And until then, thank you and bye.